cactus and succulent growers, it's Lynn, and in today's video this is going to be just a quick video of another repotting, and this time it is one of my stapelias, and this is my Stapelia gigantea, a lovely awesome succulent that is very popular in many succulent collections. I've got a few different types of stapelias in my collection, and they have the most gorgeous, amazing, breathtaking flowers on them. However, those of you who are familiar with Stapelia will also know that as beautiful as the flowers are, they also have a terrible smell. And that's because the flowers are pollinated by, it sounds really daft, but it's actually by flies. The flies actually are attracted to the disgusting smell that smells like rotting flesh, and that causes them to lay their eggs on there, and also pollinate. It sort of tricks them into thinking it's rotting flesh for real, and they lay their eggs on there as well, and this causes the flowers to become pollinated. They're quite unique and very amazing succulents, and it's time to give this one a repot. Now, I'll talk a little bit about the care very briefly with stapelias before I go into the repotting. They like a lovely sunny position, they're sun lovers, but they can also take a little bit more shade. This has been in my south facing window here in my office, and as you can see, it's got a lovely sort of pink tinge to it. They go very pink coloured when they get plenty of sun. And I give this during the spring and summer months, I give it a good water and then let the soil totally dry out in between waterings before watering again. In the winter time, so certainly from now, from October, I completely stop watering and I give this a dry and cool winter rest, and then start watering again in the spring, usually from the April time. They're not cold hardy, they do need to be protected from frost, so if you have a Stapelia, I recommend keeping them over winter at an absolute minimum temperature of about 10 Celsius, which is 50 degrees Fahrenheit. Any colder than that, they can be very prone to rot. I do know some growers of Stapelias who keep them in the unheated greenhouses here in Ireland, and they don't have problems, but personally myself, I would recommend keeping it at a minimum of 50 degrees Fahrenheit, 10 degrees Celsius in winter, and dry, no water given. They sort of flower from the spring and the summertime as well. Awesome succulents from South Africa. And there's roughly around 50 different species of Stapelia. And there's only sort of a few that are very popular in cultivation. They can be very rot prone. So when you are potting these up, and certainly when it comes to watering, you have to be extremely careful, because it's not unusual for these to rot back. Often their stems will die back if they're overwatered, and certainly very prone to rotting in the winter if you water them, or if they're kept too cold. They tend to also be, sadly, mealybug magnets. This one is nice and clean and free of mealybug, but I have had mealybug on this and many of my Stapelias in the past, and I always remove them with the rubbing alcohol to get rid of any mealybugs. They just seem to really love Stapelias, so do keep an eye out for them if you have Stapelias. And I've got the next size pot up here, one of these lovely square pots as well, just the next size up, because this is very top heavy, as you can see. It needs to be potted on. And the soil mix I've made a very well draining cactus soil. I've got some grit in here, I've also got some perlite, and I've got horticulture sharp sand and loam as well, a bit of a mixture of each, and giving it a really good stir around. I would use probably a bit more extra grit than I would with my cactus soil, and that's because, as I mentioned, Stapelias are very rot prone, and it's sometimes, if you're a little bit too over generous with watering and you think you can rot your Stapelia, I'd probably recommend potting up in a clay pot so the soil dries out even faster. I'm very careful with the watering, and as I mentioned, I'm going to be using a very well draining cactus and succulent mix, so I know that when I do water the Stapelia, which won't be now until next spring in April, there'll be no problems with rotting. So do bear in mind a very well draining succulent and cactus mix for your Stapelia. So here we go. Let's get taken out the pot and repotting. So then first thing first, you want to squeeze this pot. This is one of them plastic ones, but it's not one that's very easy to squeeze. It's a little bit tough. So Let's turn it onto its side. And as I just want to show you, the roots are coming through, as you can see. So desperate for a repot. And I've got so many plants I wanted to repot this year, this summer. And I'm having to just panic now because it's autumn and I have to do them before the winter kicks in because they're desperate to be repotted. And here I always mention about giving a good check with the roots. And just look how root bound this is, guys. It's totally root bound. There's not much soil left. And because it is so root bound there, I'm not going to be loosening up the roots. Stapelias, in my personal experience, I've potted them up when they've been like this into the new soil and the roots grow well into it. Certain types of cacti and succulents, I recommend loosening up the roots and taking the old soil off, or as much of the old soil as you can, to loosen up the roots. This is so root bound. I mean, you can see, look at that, guys, that if I was to just go like this, which I was going to do, and loosen up all the roots, it's going to damage them, especially this late in the year. So I'm going to leave it as it is. I've done this before, no trouble with Stapelia. And you do want to be very careful when you are repotting Stapelias to check the roots. As I mentioned, they're very prone to mealybugs. And also that comes as well with root mealybugs. There seem to be really root mealybug magnets as well, Stapelias. No mealybugs on this whatsoever. I know that because when I take them out the pots, I would always see the white powder with a bluish, sort of almost fluorescent blue tinge to them when you've got root mealybugs. This is absolutely fine, so no problem there. Happy days. Just give it a little wobbly wobble, little dance to shake off excess soil here. And then here we go. I'm going to be putting some soil in the bottom of the pot there. So obviously I want to make sure that there's a couple of inches at the bottom, as you can see there. And then I'm going to gently place this in. It's very easy to repot this one, no sharp thorns on it, to make sure it's pretty centralised. And just come around so you can see a little bit more what I'm doing here. Easy days. These are easy days when I repot these type of easy succulents. And I wasn't going to film a video, but I thought, well, I can, because I've got to do it anyway. And good to get these plants sort of potted out. It's one less thing I have to worry about when we get the new polytunnel in the next few weeks or so, because we're going to be mega busy then. So I'm thinking I have to get these plants all repotted. Summer has just run away with me. And always make sure you go all around the sides here with the soil. Oh, I just love repotting. It's so therapeutic. There we go. Give it a little bit of a gentle tap. And then what I like to do, and I always sort of mention this as well, is I like to then use a blunt end of one of these little handled spoons and just very carefully push the excess soil down the sides of the pot. And as I mentioned, I will not be watering this at all now until next spring, probably the April time. And this is in my grow room anyway, because I mentioned it needs winter warmth. Stapelias are very prone to rot, even when they're kept dry, if they're kept in a cold, unheated greenhouse. So it's not one I have out in the polytunnel. I will have this, put this back in the window in my grow room here. South facing window, get plenty of light there. There we go. So if I was repotting this in the spring and summer, which is what I was going to do, I would leave it about 10 days before I started to water again. And the reason for that is I just like the roots to settle into the new pot. And usually I have to disturb the roots slightly to loosen them up when I put them in the pot. I haven't had to touch the roots at all in this. I just think it's so root bound, I'm best just leaving it. And but even so, I would still leave it at least 10 days before watering. But as this is October now, and a bit late in the year for me, usually repotting, this will be kept dry until next spring. And no problem with the roots, they'll just grow into the new soil anyway. So happy days. So then, Stapelia gigantea, the little label in there. And that's done. Another happy plant. So thank you so much for watching, guys. For lots more tips and tricks, then don't you forget to subscribe and do also click the notification bell. You can also follow me on Instagram, Twitter and Facebook at Desert Plants of Avalon. And do check out my website, desertplantsofavalon.com. I want to wish you all a fantastic plant-powered day. Thank you for repotting me, Miss Linny.